You've tried the Kong full of peanut butter method. You've tried the high value toy, playing music when you leave your dog alone. You've tried crate training to see if your dog will just cry it out, but nothing has actually been getting to the root issue of your dog's separation anxiety or separation related problem. This was the story of Kiwi's guardian, of Ollie's guardian, of Deja Loaf's guardian, and even Tucker's guardian. They had tried all of the methods that I just mentioned, but nothing was getting to their dog's separation anxiety until this method that I'm giving away with you today. In this video, I'm breaking down our A to Z steps to desensitizing your dog to being comfortable left alone. In addition to the A to Z steps, I will be covering how often you should be training, your dog's stress behavior and what to look for in their body language. We'll be covering whether you should use treats, toys, or other distractors. And we'll also be breaking down common mistakes that guardians make when implementing this desensitization protocol. So whether your dog follows you from room to room excessively, can't even take a shower alone, or maybe your dog can't be comfortable in the backyard alone, or maybe your dog literally has a panic attack as soon as you walk out that front door for work or dinner. Well, in this video, I'm breaking down all of those stress-related problems and how to treat that. But I do want to give a disclaimer that this is a very comprehensive video and I'll be covering several different phases of your dog's recovery journey. So go into the save section of this video. Make sure you save this to your library so that you can reference it easily in the future. And as your dog progresses in their journey, you can circle back to the later chapters of this video and get a refresher on your next steps. Now, a lot of people think that treating dog separation anxiety is as simple as walking out your front door and leaving your dog alone. And in a very, very basic level, that is what you're doing. However, it's also a very oversimplification of a very strategic play. It's like saying that chess is merely moving a couple pieces off to the side a couple inches, and that's all there is to it. There's actually a lot more strategy going into the play than just moving your finger a little bit to the left. And that is true for separation anxiety. In fact, I imagine if it was as simple as you just walking at your front door and leaving your dog alone, then you wouldn't have even looked at this video in the first place. So come along with this journey as we start to unpack. Yes, on a very basic level, we are walking out our front door and leaving our dog alone. But on a very strategic level, there are moves, there are plays that we are doing to influence the success rate, to influence our dog to feel comfortable while alone. So the strategy that we'll be using to treat your dog's separation anxiety is called systematic desensitization. And I'm going to be covering the A to Z steps on how to implement this strategy. But before we get into that, the very, 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 very first step that you need to do before you do any formal training is you need to become very clear on what your goal is. Now, a lot of times when I ask guardians, what is your goal? They say, what do you mean, Jenna? I want to leave my dog alone. Isn't that a goal enough? It's like saying you want to go to the NBA. Is it a goal? Yes. But is that really the very first goal you need to be focusing on? Is that a very clear goal? Probably not. There are little milestones that you need to be hitting in the interim before you get to the NBA, right? And that is how you want to think of it, is you need to break down your big objective of I want to leave my dog for 8 hours a day while I go to work. You need to break that down into really, really, really small milestones. And depending on, your dog's separation anxiety and depending on the severity of it, it could be as simple as like Gracie, with Team Gracie, I just want my dog to be able to go outside and go potty by themselves for the first time because it's cold and snowing and I don't want to go out there with him anymore. Or it could be like Team Deja, I just want to be able to take a shower without my dog crying when I close the door on her. Or maybe it was like Team Winston, where you just want to be able to get the mail. Like you just want to be able to walk out your door for 2 seconds and get the mail. Or it could be like Team Ollie, and I just want to be able to garden in my front yard while my dog stays inside and chills. You want to be very clear on what objective are you trying to accomplish and what is going to be required in order to accomplish that goal. So required being, what is the duration? What tools will you need? Like, are you going to be wearing shoes? Are you going to have to lock the door? You want to be aware of, if this is my objective, what needs to happen in order for me to accomplish that objective? And the thing is depending on how severe your dog's separation anxiety, if you're not even able to take a shower without your dog having a panic attack, because God forbid you should close the door on them and they should, not be allowed in the room with you. If that is the case, then you really want to consider if it's smart to jump right into walking out your front door or right into focusing on a big objective like getting in the car and driving away. Why? Because, well, first of all, let's get your life back together. Let's focus on you taking showers. You want to be thinking about, what do I need? What is going to make my life more manageable? What is going to systematize my life a little bit more so that we can afford to focus on those big goals, right? Maybe just being able to take my dog out to go potty by herself without me having to walk out there with her is going to start to relieve some of the day-to-day stress that I'm facing as having a dog with separation anxiety. And so you want to be more systematic, intentional with the goals that you are creating in treating your dog's separation anxiety. Step 2 to treating your dog's separation anxiety is to make sure that your dog is not horribly stressed, not far over threshold. And over threshold is just a big fancy way of saying that your dog is so overwhelmed or so stressed, in such a state of panic, that they are not in a healthy, conducive place to learn cognitively. Now, for example, the dog on your screen right now, Arlo. Arlo may not look horrendously over threshold. He might not look horrendously stressed. He's not destroying things. He's not clawing on the door yet. He's not barking excessively. However, in Arlo's case, even in this video, he is too far over threshold because his body is too engaged in the fight, flight, or freeze response. Recognize that your dog's separation anxiety or separation related problem is rooted in an anxiety disorder. It is rooted in a mental health disorder. That is how you really want to be thinking about this, is when you're seeing your dog panic, they are experiencing trauma. And you might be wondering, wow, that's a really significant exaggeration, Jenna, of what my dog is experiencing. But actually, let's break this down. When a dog is so reliant on their guardian for food, for water, for shelter, for love and companionship, for warmth, when an individual, and in this case your dog, is so reliant on you to provide all of those things, they are understandably attached to you. They are understandably going to want you around. And when you walk out that door, they perceive that there goes my water, there goes my shelter, there goes my everything, walking out the door, my companion, my love, and I don't know what that means. What am I supposed to do here all by myself? And then you add in a basis of genetics where there are certain breeds and certain individuals who are hardwired to want to be around their companion, want to be around their human or otherwise. It makes sense then that your dog is having a full-fledged panic attack when you walk out that front door. And this is really one of the takeaways you need to really check right now is, if every single time you walk out that door, your dog is having a panic attack, then that means every single time you walk out that door and you leave your dog alone, they're experiencing trauma. And trauma leaves a lasting impact. The trauma that is experienced from you just closing your bathroom door is so significant that it's just reinforcing the idea in your dog's mind that they are alone. And so mitigating how often they can go through that trauma, if at all, is critical to effective training. If you are putting your dog in excessive emotional responses throughout the training experience, then what you're really doing is intentionally putting your dog through trauma. And in dogs or otherwise, trauma is not healthy. So to effectively avoid your dog from going over threshold in the training recovery process, what you're going to need to do is find their threshold. So when you hear someone say, I want you to find their threshold, what that really means is you're running a series of experiments. Now, to be clear, when we say we want you to find your dog's threshold, it's not like there's a definitive line. It's not a distinctive line that you can just draw and be like, well, she's under threshold and now she's over threshold. It's not going to be that black and white, my friends, unfortunately, although it would be easy if it was. What it'll actually be is a gauge, right? And it's going to be a spectrum. And so it might look like over here, it's actually relatively mild stress, maybe stress that your dog can still think through, still some critical analysis happening. And as they shift over into this side, suddenly they become more engaged in their automatic responses. They're more engaged in their fight, flight, or freeze because there's more adrenaline and their body is responding to the significant, what it perceives threat. And the threat in this case is that they're alone and they don't know where they're going to get their resources and their companion has just walked out on the door, right? So as they get further into that spectrum of panic, their ability to think cognitively and learn is impaired. And so our goal is to keep them on this side of the spectrum. Let's call it the safe side of the spectrum, or under threshold. And to do this, you're going to run several experiments. It's very important that when you're running experiments, you recognize that you are finding what you don't know. You are finding out what you do not already know. If you know right now watching this video that if you walk out that front door, your dog is going to run to the front door, is going to bark excessively, is going to pant, he might pee himself, he's going to scratch at the door, he's going to do all the things. If you already know that, don't walk out the front door, right? You already know at that point that your dog is over threshold. So what you are actually running experiments are things that you are unsure. How is this going to affect my dog? How is this going to, what if I do it this way? What if I do it that way? How will my dog respond if? That is the purpose of experiments. And in fact, one of the reasons why I'm showing you guys these videos of dogs that are not excessively over threshold, they're actually not clawing out of stuff very often, they're not barking excessively, they're not pacing, they're not peeing. One of the reasons why those videos don't exist is because I just don't let my clients get to that point, right? I'm not letting my clients let their dogs get to that state, because we are practicing keeping our dogs under threshold and we already know what's going to get them to that point. We've seen it already. So there's no point in running those experiments. So you might ask questions in your experiments like, what happens if I just put on my sandals and I walk to the front door, but I don't open the front door or walk out? Or what happens if I leave my dog behind a baby gate in just one part of the house as opposed to giving them access to the entire house? Or in that case, what happens if I leave my dog loose? Or what happens if I put my dog in a crate? You're asking these questions of things that you may not already know. What happens if I am carrying my purse versus not carrying my purse? What do I do if I, am wearing street clothes versus my work clothes? How will my dog respond in those cases? Again, you're running experiments to collect information about the intel you do not already know. Now, as a pro tip to treating your dog's separation anxiety and understanding your dog's threshold, one of the things to be cautious of is the freeze solution. So again, we have our fight, our flight, and we have freeze. And my God, will some dogs freeze. In fact, the dog on your screen right now, Mia, she was the worst freeze case of separation anxiety I think I've ever seen. This girl was a statue when she was left alone. And she would hold her breath. She would just stare into the abyss and wait for her guardians to come home. And so you might be thinking, well, gee, my dog isn't barking, my dog isn't peeing, my dog isn't whatever. She's just standing there and it's a little creepy, but I'm not gonna get noise complaints. Well, that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that your dog is in shutdown mode. One way of looking at it is that the body is in so much distress that it has just shut down. It is in freeze. That is a level of panic, a level of stress that while you may not be, dealing with the unwanted behaviors like barking or destroying or peeing, while that may be a perk, the mental health of your dog is still obviously impaired because they are so frozen. And this is just something to be cognizant of when you're running these experiments is while maybe your dog is just looking and sniffing, that doesn't inherently mean that they are under threshold. Now, the best practices to running these experiments is to keep a both video and written log. I recommend the Whines brand. They have a good collection of cameras that I've found work great for my clients. And you also want to keep a written log that consolidates that video footage. And this is really where your opportunity to scan and find trends and really identify like, you know what? Every time he's about to go over threshold, he yawns. Or every time he goes over threshold, he is going to scratch at the door with his paw, right? This is your opportunity when you see it written out like that to find trends. You might be thinking, how many experiments should I run and where am I running these? Again, number one, this comes back to your goal. So what goal are you trying to accomplish, at least immediately? The experiment should be designed around that. So if your objective is to take a shower by yourself, there's no reason why you should be walking out the front door. If your objective is to take your dog out to go potty by themselves, there's no reason why you should be working on, closing the bedroom door and leaving your dog in the living room. You want to be mindful about what is the objective you're trying to accomplish, and the experiment should be rounded around that. Now, you might be running anywhere from 5 to 20 experiments. I don't recommend doing much less than 3 of the same thing. And the reason is because if you just try to run one experiment and make a bunch of decisions based off of one event and one time, that's not a very good way of running experiments and running science. We actually need a good collection, and there's a lot of reasons why that one event can be a one-off. It might not be a consistent experiment. So instead, you want to kind of repeat the experiment several times to see if there are trends. Now, again, we are only running the experiments we don't know, and we're not pushing your dog far, far, far over threshold. So when you start to see those stress signals, you are returning to your dog. When you start to feel intuitively like, I think she's getting too stressed, return to your dog. Do not let her experience that trauma, because every single time you do, you're actually just delaying the recovery journey. You're actually just slowing down your end game. Okay, so you have now come up with a very clear objective. You have a very clear goal of where and how you want to be training. You have ran experiments to learn about your dog's behavior and where they become too stressed. Now you're ready to create a training plan to treating your dog's separation anxiety. Now, I recommend 2 books. The first is Julie Naismith's Be Right Back, and the second is the first edition of Melina De Martini Price's book, Treating Separation Anxiety. Now, those 2 are really great books, and I feel like they're very accessible to you if you're a reader. The one thing that I will say is that I have made some considerable tweaks to how I treat dog separation anxiety from those books. And this is kind of where I'm going to sway off a little bit from them. Number one, they really focus on duration. And what they do is they encourage their readers, encourage their clients to build up 15 minutes of comfy alone time before incorporating goodbye cues. Now, goodbye cues are things like you grabbing your keys, you putting on your shoes, you grabbing your purse. It could be even you taking a shower if you always take a shower before you leave. Goodbye cues are any indications to your dog before you leave that tell your dog you are about to leave, right? So all of those preliminary things are cues that tell your dog, I'm about to be left alone. In those books, they often recommend that you build up 15 minutes of duration before you even begin to incorporate goodbye cues. I don't agree with this. And the reason is because if you do that, you'll be standing outside like Kiwi's guardian for 30 minutes in your slippers in the cold, freezing your butt off. This is impractical. There's no reason why you should be standing outside in the cold and in the rain just so that you can say you hit a special milestone in duration. It's very impractical. And so again, if we're focusing more on our goals, what we should be doing is thinking, I'm only going to incorporate the goodbye cues that are necessary for whatever objective I'm trying to accomplish. So if you don't need your car keys to garden your front lawn, don't have your car keys. If you don't need to wear your fancy suit outfit to just be able to walk out in your backyard and do a couple yard work or get the mail, there's no reason why you should be focusing on those goodbye cues. You only want to be thinking about the goodbye cues that are pertinent to whatever objective you're trying to accomplish. And if it's not in that scope, then save it for another day and get to it when you have capacity, or get to it when your dog is ready. So the way you want to be thinking about incorporating your goodbye cues is it's like a little teeter-totter, right? Where you increase duration and then you include the goodbye cues, and then you increase the duration and then you add in goodbye cues, and then you increase the duration and you add in goodbye cues, as opposed to what those books recommend, which is add in duration and then just go all the way back down in duration and add in goodbye cues. It's just like this zigzag thing. I don't really see that. I want you guys leveling together so that by the end of it, you have 5 solid minutes where you can functionally take your dog out to pee without you and you're just standing inside and everything's hunky-dory. Or you can functionally take a shower. It's not just that you have 20 minutes to take a shower, it's that you're literally taking a shower and you don't have to go backwards and incorporate all of those things. Now let's talk about how you're going to create a training plan to treat your dog's separation anxiety. Now, two things on this. A lot of times I see guardians make mistakes of increasing the duration or increasing the difficulty too quickly or too predictably. Here's what this means. When you are increasing the difficulty too quickly, maybe one day you are just going out the door for 3 seconds without any goodbye cues, and the very next day you decide to leave for 3 minutes with all of the goodbye cues. Or maybe it's not that stark. Maybe it's actually just that you leave your dog alone for 3 seconds and then the very next day you're leaving your dog alone for 30 seconds. That's too big of a leap. And that's the first mistake. The second mistake that I see is they do it too predictably. So what will happen is they increase the difficulty every single day, and the dog starts to see that things are getting harder every single day. This dog is going to start to see the pattern. And the second that your dog starts to notice, hey, this is getting harder every single day, they're going to slam on the brakes because they see where this is headed. They see the objective now. They are filled in the know, and they're like, I don't like this. This is not the vibe. No. And they're going to put on the brakes and they're going to start throwing a tantrum. So what will happen, I've seen guardians do this, is they work their way all the way up to 3-4 whole minutes. And they're so proud. They're like, look, Jenna, I got 4 minutes. And I go, that's great. And then a week later, they message me and they're like, I don't understand. Now I can only get 4 seconds. What happened? You probably didn't lay the groundwork too well. It probably wasn't solid enough. The thing is when you're treating separation anxiety, I want you to think of progress in a domino effect. It's gonna start off really, really, really small. It's gonna start off like a little ball, and you're gonna feel like you're making really slow progress. You're gonna jump from example like 3 seconds to 5 seconds to 7 seconds to 8.5 to 9 to 10 to 15 to 20 to 30, and it's gonna kind of snowball like that, right? You're going to literally be able to acquire time faster the further you get into it. And so ironically, that first minute of alone time takes forever. It takes a very long time. You're not happy with it. You feel like it's moving too slow. But then what ends up happening is once you get to like say the 5-minute mark or the 10-minute mark, things just roll. It's just like super, super, super quick. And you jump from literally like, I don't know, 25 minutes to 45 minutes in a matter of 2 weeks. And you're like, how did that happen? Well, it's because you took the groundwork so slowly. It's because you really laid that foundation that you were able to snowball the effect. And by the time you get into those longer durations or harder criteria, you're able to tackle them a lot easier. So when you're building out your training plan, you want to be thinking 2 things. 1, I need to intentionally change the criteria every single day in difficulty. So for example, there's a training plan on your screen. I recommend you pause it so that you can look at it. But what you'll see is that we don't use the same goodbye cues every single day. And you can see that we increase and decrease the duration of the goodbye consistently. So it's not a linear difficulty. It's not getting harder every single day. It's actually getting harder one day, then getting way easier, then just getting mild, then getting a little bit harder, then getting easier again, then getting really easy, then getting, it's going up and down. This is intentional. This is intentional for a couple reasons. The first is that, like I said, we want to make sure that we are not too predictable in increasing difficulty with your dog. That's number 1. Number 2 is that your dog is going to need rest. Your dog is going to be affected by other stress other than the fact that he's being left alone, right? There are other stressors in play. If your dog has reactivity, you've got that going on. If your dog has noise sensitivity, a lot of separation anxiety kids are noise sensitive. So you've got that stressor going on. Maybe your dog is stressed because of how difficult a hunt was for food earlier. Like, I don't know, there could be any number of stressors that are impacting your dog's mental health at any given moment, and it is all going to be culminated, it's all going to impact the result or the outcome of a given goodbye or of a given training session. So that's the other reason why we are constantly adjusting the difficulty of a training plan. Now, step 4 to treating your dog's separation anxiety is the one that we have all been waiting for. It is the one that we have been longing to get to. You get to walk out your front door, you get to go into the other room, you get to otherwise leave your dog alone finally. But again, we're doing this strategically. We are not just laissez-faire about it, okay? We're going to have a clear training plan and we're going to execute that training plan. Now, while you are walking at your front door and while you are on the other side, while you are actually leaving your dog alone, I recommend having a camera on them that you are looking at on your cell phone. So you have a very clear image of them. You're consistently reading their behavior and you're ready to return to them as soon as they need you before they get the opportunity to become too stressed. Now, I did a full body language breakdown on separation anxiety specifically. I'll link that here. I'll also link it in the description box below. But something that I want you to be mindful of is while we do have a basic idea of stress behaviors, we know things like lip licks and yawns and shake-offs and, whimpers versus loud barks. While we are aware that there are subtle stress signals, we also need to appreciate that every single dog is going to have their own individual stress and bravery responses. For example, Banjo was notorious for spinning, and what we noticed is that he would still spin right before he was about to lay down. So spinning was not a consistent indicator that he was too stressed or not stressed enough. That wasn't great intel. He would spin when he was stressed, and he was also spinning when he was about to lay down. On the other hand, we had Ollie, who would play bow when he was first left alone, but he would usually regulate himself shortly after. So what we found in Ollie's case was that that play bow was actually a good indication that he was calming himself, that was not a negative stress response, it just was. And so we were able to work past that. And this leads me into my next point, which is you need to be studying your own dog's individual behavior trends. It is good, it is smart, it is intelligent for you to learn the stress behavior repertoire. It is important that you have awareness of behaviors to look for it. That is true. But once you have done that initial studying and you've watched the videos and you've learned about what behaviors to observe, then it comes down to what do they mean for my dog? What do they mean when my dog does it? For example, if I can put this in human terms, for example, we know a smile is generally a happy indicator, generally. But what happens when there's context around it? What happens if they're smiling and no one else is smiling? What happens if they're smiling and glaring at you through the side of their eyes? What does that mean, right? Like, when we put context around the smile, is it still a happy thing? That's how you want to be examining your dog's behavior, which is like, we see that he's doing a stress yawn. Stress yawns are generally indicators that the dog is negatively stressed. But when we put it within context, when we examine our own dog doing it, what does it mean then? That's how you want to be studying your dog's behavior. As a pro tip, I recommend that you come up with shorthand lingo for your respective dog. So you are going to be logging probably on your phone or on a piece of paper. You don't want to have to write the exact same long paragraphs of every single behavior you see your dog doing. That would be tedious. No one wants to do that. So as a pro tip, what I recommend is look for behaviors that go together. So ears back and head down. A lot of those behaviors happen simultaneously in tandem. Well, then you could just make a shorthand and say ears head, right? Or back and low or whatever, it doesn't really matter, but come up with some sort of shorthand that tells you those two things occurred simultaneously. That saves you a lot of time when you're actually logging the data, and it also makes it easier for you to find the trends. Now, how often should you be training your dog separation anxiety, and for how long do you anticipate this recovery? A couple of things on this. The general recommendation is you're going to do about one goodbye or one practice of comfy alone time per day. This is a very general answer, just so you know. And the real answer, if we're going to be completely honest, is I don't know, ask your dog, right? The real answer is your dog will tell you how much they can actually handle and how frequently they can handle you leaving them. Some dogs are going to need it a lot less. Some dogs will actually do better if you're only leaving them 3-4 times per week, but they're super quality alone time as they're learning a whole lot and it feels really good. That's going to be far better than feeling like you have to do 7 or 14 different goodbyes and actually you're just rehearsing undesired behavior. That's how you really want to think about it. It's not so much about finding the exact magical number of how many times you should be practicing. It's actually about how can I make sure that when we are practicing, they are quality goodbyes and my dog is learning methodically to be left alone. That's how you want to be viewing it. Now, how long can this recovery journey be? Well, for starters, it really depends on what separation related problems your dog has. If your dog is only stressed when you put a wall between them or a door between them, that's a completely different disorder and a completely different prognosis outlook than it would be if your dog had that plus had clinical separation anxiety and couldn't be left alone without their mom whatsoever, right? You can't even begin to think about walking out your front door. So a lot of the duration of the recovery and how long to expect on that is influenced by what type of separation related problem your dog has. To give you some context though, I can tell you, most of my separation anxiety clients that I work with are treating their dog separation anxiety for about 6 to 12 months. And I know that that seems like a really long time. But the reason it can be a long time is because there was so much history of being left alone in a traumatic situation, right? So a good kind of gauge is to think, how long has my dog been suffering with separation anxiety? And it's going to be at least that long for them to start to feel comfortable. So if your dog has been suffering from separation anxiety for a year, 2 years long, don't be surprised when it takes a year or 2 years to fully treat your dog's separation anxiety. I'm not saying it has to take that long. I'm not saying it even will take that long. I'm saying that's the prediction or the preparedness you need to have in case it does take that long. Now, when you walk out your front door to leave your dog alone in these goodbyes, should you be saying goodbye to them? Should you be giving them a cue? Should you be telling them, I'll be right back and I love you and here's a treat and here's a whatever? And this is a really contentious question, I'll be honest. Depending on what trainer you talk to, you're gonna get like 500 different answers on this, okay? The real answer, come in close, the real secret answer is, I don't know, ask your dog, right? Some dogs are gonna do much better with having a very clear cue that tells them, I am leaving right now. This is what you can expect from happening because I'm telling you directly I'm about to leave, right? Some other dogs are gonna be told that they're being left alone and it's gonna cause absolute pandemonium. They'll be like, oh my God, this is a red flag. I don't like it. This feels awful. So you need to be thinking about what is true for my dog. Does my dog do better with just more silent interaction, just more passive living, and they just kind of study my bodily routine and my, how I actually operate, and that's what's giving them intel? Or do I need to give my dog very explicit information? That's something that you're going to have to experiment with. This is part of your journey in communicating with your dog and having an understanding and a dialogue with them, is find out what is true for your dog. Now, when you leave your dog alone, should you be giving them a Kong full of peanut butter, some other high value toys? Should you be playing music when they're alone? Let's cover this. Number one, I do not recommend actually focusing on treating separation anxiety with a Kong full of peanut butter or any other high value toy / treat. This doesn't make any sense to me, and here's why. Number one, the idea is that we're distracting them, right? We're distracting our dog from feeling alone. The thing is, if your dog has an anxiety disorder, if your dog is experiencing a panic attack, if your dog is experiencing trauma, you will not be able to distract your dog from an anxiety attack. You will not be able to distract your dog from trauma. You might be able to distract your dog from boredom, but if that was the case, you wouldn't have been watching this video and you probably wouldn't be at this stage anyway. So I'm here to tell you, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to try. I'm just saying when it doesn't work, we can't be shocked, because Of course it didn't work. Your dog is experiencing a mental health crisis, and that's not going to be fixed with, you know, a cute little doggy toy that squeaks. Even with all of that said, even though I've said that, something to do in the later stages of training. You have been on the recovery journey for a while at this point. You are well versed in all of the things that I've already taught you in this video. You have been executing. You are a pro at treating your dog's separation anxiety. At that point, sometimes it is a good experiment to run to see, okay, what does happen if I leave my dog with a Kong full of peanut butter? What does happen if I put on, you know, a distraction toy of some sort? What's going to happen then? And the reason I bring this up is because now they are mentally in a different state. If they've been on the journey for a while, they're no longer in a state of panic and trauma and anxiety and stress, right? They're no longer in that state. They might be in a state of confusion. They might even be in a state of boredom. So in those cases, giving them a toy or a distractor makes sense. So if you are in those later stages, that's definitely an experiment to run. When it comes to music playing, really the music playing is an experiment to run, as I've said 1,800 times in this video. But I can tell you that the dogs that are going to most benefit from the noise playing are our noise sensitive dogs. The dogs who, if they're home alone and they hear a dog barking outside, that's going to cause them a lot of stress, and it's going to spark up their anxiety, and now they're barking and peeing and racing around their house, right? So the dogs who are noise sensitive, I do recommend there is some sort of white noise machine or classical music playing, whatever. For the dogs that maybe don't necessarily have that problem, my answer to that is, what are you comfortable doing for the rest of your life? Because if you treat your dog's separation anxiety by turning on music and that becomes the new routine, that's the new system, well, that's what you're going to be doing for the next 15 years. Are you good with that? If you are, cool, great, good, go for it. If you're like, man, that's not the vibe we're going with in these years, then turn it off, right? Don't be setting up a routine that you are not willing to sustain. Now, what happens if you have to leave your dog alone and you're in the middle of training and you know that they're gonna have to experience trauma? Let's say, hypothetically, you know that you've only been able to successfully leave your dog alone for 1 minute, but tomorrow you absolutely have to go to the grocery store and you need to leave your dog longer. Okay, first and foremost, don't panic. It's going to be okay. I'm not saying this is ideal. I'm not saying this is the world's greatest moment, but we can make the best out of a crappy situation. Because again, we're trying to limit how often your dog is experiencing this trauma. And if you have been intentional about really minimizing the frequency of how often your dog is going over the threshold, how often your dog is being left alone, then this one case shouldn't completely unravel everything, okay? It can, because trauma is trauma, and many times trauma only has to occur once. You only have to be chased down the street by a scary clown once to find out you don't like scary clowns. Hello, that was me. That was a story from Jenna's life, okay? So I'm not saying one event can't cause trauma. I'm saying it's not likely to if you have been laying the groundwork successfully. Okay, so if you have to leave your dog alone, some of the recommendations that I give is you want to find ways to disrupt the pattern. So if your pattern for whatever training you've been doing is to wear a specific sandals, right? You wear sandals, maybe you usually take a shower right before, or you are brushing your teeth, that would be typically the routine that you're implementing. Well, interestingly, when you go to leave your dog alone, in this particular case, to go to the grocery store, you actually intentionally want to disrupt the routine. Instead of wearing sandals, maybe you decide to wear tennis shoes. And maybe while you're brushing your teeth, you decide to sing and watch TV and sit down, right? Many people don't sit down when they brush their teeth. Or maybe you take a shower and then you just do nothing for the rest of the day. You don't actually start getting ready to go. So you're intentionally disrupting your routine. Now, this will be stressful for your dog. I want to say that emphatically. You changing your routine will be stressful for your dog. Yes. But the objective in doing this is to give very clear indicators something is different. Something is awry, something is afoot, something is happening, this is not what we do, right? We are breaking the pattern intentionally so that later on when you do return back to your training, you can maintain the pattern, the routine that you had already set up, and they're not reliving what was happening before with being left alone, right? So yes, it's stressful, but we are making the best out of a crappy situation. It's not like ideal, and I'm not recommending everybody do it throughout the entire journey. I'm saying if you have to leave your dog alone, that is the way to do it. Now, if you are like me and you really like getting into the nitty-gritty of knowing exactly how to create a training plan, you really want a paper, you want the system, you want the science of creating a training plan, well then, this video is for you. I recommend you watch that next. If you enjoyed this video, it would really help me in the YouTube algorithm if you considered liking. Hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified when I drop a new video, and I'll see you guys next week.